This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors with Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. And anything you want to know about where to find me, where to contact me, what my other websites are for my podcast, my columns at the Colorado Springs Independent, my photography website, all that stuff you can find at hikingbob.com. And I look forward to hearing from the listeners out there and the followers because we get some good suggestions, one of which today, one email from a listener is actually leading to the big topic in today's podcast. So definitely like hearing from you all. And if you have suggestions or you have a question, feel free to contact me. Definitely want to hear from you. Today, you're spared from listening to me solo as we did last week because my co-host, Kevin Wild Westendorf, is here. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, everyone. Kevin here, and you can find me at wildwestendorf.com and on social media, primarily Facebook and Instagram at wildwestendorf.
Thanks, Kevin, for being here. You know, it's kind of an interesting little weather pattern we're dealing with. Now, of course, we're recording this on Monday. It goes live on Wednesday. A lot of weather is going to change between now and then. Supposed to be some rain, but I think fall is finally hitting here.
Oh, yeah.
Still kind of warm, but definitely a crispness in the air, a little bit of a chill in the morning. The fall colors are changing.
Yeah.
This past weekend, I did a lot of stuff. On this past Friday, there was a piece on Fox 21 News. I did a couple of segments with them on the morning show that were recorded a couple of days prior, but they aired on Friday. I think they look pretty good. I've heard a lot of positive feedback from that. Mueller State Park is looking good. The Highway 67 corridor will probably be peaking right about the time you hear this, but this coming weekend should probably still be pretty good. I know up north things are changing pretty rapidly and hitting peak during this week. And, of course, now from here you just kind of start moving south, which I think I'm going to do this week. I'm going to head south a little bit and see what's looking down there. And, you know, here in town, we're below the level where aspens typically grow. I mean, but there's a lot of other stuff. The oaks and the elms and the cottonwoods and what maples there are out there, we have one in the front yard here, are all starting to change. And, you know, I was out hiking today, and I was down at Aiken Canyon, which is one of my favorite places to go. And with Cole the dog doing rehab, he still can't go hiking with me. So I went out there by myself. And you know, dogs can't go hiking there anyway, so it's a perfect opportunity for me to go hiking without him guilt-free. Yep. Unless you look at his face, and then there's no guilt-free there. Well, in any case, we typically sneer at the scrub oak. It's in the way of stuff, and try hiking through that, and it's
a pain.
Not a lot of fun, and in the fall it just turns as rust brown. But before it turns that rust brown, it looks pretty cool. It turns a couple oranges and yellows and stuff like that, but it doesn't last long. So today I was hiking through Aiken Canyon and saw a lot of the scrub oak, gamble oak, scrub oak, that was changing colors, and it looks pretty cool. But in a couple of days, it's just going to be that nasty brown-looking color. It's not going to be very attractive. But if you catch that, you know, that's coming too. So there is still a little bit of fall colors. They may not be aspens. Not every fall color in Colorado is an aspen, for crying out loud. Yeah. Some of it's much more, nicer looking, especially the oaks. Yeah. Really good. On the piece we did with Fox 21 last week, they asked me for some pictures from, you know, down around Colorado Springs, and I sent them some pictures I shot, you know, in Bear Creek, you know, the Bear Creek area, and also just some photos I had of some oak leaves that I had changing, and they're very colorful. So if you don't want to drive an hour up to Highway 67 and go up to Cripple Creek, or you don't have time to drive a couple hours south, or, you know, further west, you know, Kenosha Pass, Weston Pass, Boreas Pass, those places out there. Don't forget, we do get some pretty cool fall colors down here in town, but they're going to be probably a little further along or a little further down the road, another week, 2 weeks maybe, before all that happens. So just keep an eye on that kind of stuff. One other thing, there's an announcement that came out today that the TOPS program 25th anniversary is coming up, and it will be October 21st at 5 o'clock at the Vibes Baseball Stadium over on Tut Boulevard, which is also adjacent to the new Coleman open space that they're developing. From 5 o'clock to 7:30, October 21st, TOPS 25th celebration. Should be a lot of fun celebrating all the things that, you know, the great stuff with the TOPS program. And Kevin, as you know, and I'm on the committee, and it's, you know, a lot of great work being done there. And the best part about it is it's citizen-led. The TOPS program was created by a citizen initiative. It is overseen by a TOPS working committee, which is a subset of the Park Advisory Board, which is also citizen, appointed committee. So it's a pretty cool program. I think it's a pretty neat thing that we have that here in Colorado Springs. So that's coming up. And this coming Saturday, the Cheyenne Mountain Run at Cheyenne Mountain State Park. Just be aware of that most of the park will be closed to hiking for most of the day, because that run will be going there. If you want to go hiking there, the trails on the north end of the park, Boulder Run, the Blackmer Trail, and all the trails up around the campgrounds, including the dog-friendly trail. So if you want to bring your dog on leash, you can do that. But most of the park will be closed to hikers, cyclists, everything else for most of the day this coming Saturday. So keep that in mind. Kevin, I've been trying to catch up on hiking, being away for a week. I did one hike while I was away on that trip.
Wow.
While we were in British Columbia, because the first day we stopped in Prince Rupert, and they took us out to one of their provincial parks in the rainforest. It was a lot of fun. The volunteer naturalist and hiking guide there was very good in talking about the history of everything, and I had a good time, but there was also the rest of the week no hiking. So
yeah,
I've been trying to catch up. I'm still aiming for 800 miles this year. I'm going to have to hustle to do it, but I think I can get it done.
Nice.
It might be 800.005, but it'll be 800 miles, but it's going to take me a little work. How are you doing with hiking? You getting any hiking in while you're this week?
I've been staying more local because I'm waiting on my car to get into the shop, and of course there's a wait list because you got to get a reservation for everything now. So it's a little frustrating because I wanted to get fixed, but I want to make sure it goes to a shop that I trust.
Sure. Too.
So yeah, just been staying in Cheyenne Canyon and Bear Creek. I did over the weekend. I did another loop on the new Daniels Pass trail system. Mm-hmm. That was built in Cheyenne Canyon, and I forget that they did a bang-up job on that trail for all the new trails there. Yeah,
it's really turned out to be a pretty nice place. I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago, and they talked about, I want to go do the Daniels Pass trails, but I got to come in all the way around Gold Camp Road. I said, well, you don't, because when I wrote those columns, I said you had to come in that way because the main road through North Cheyenne Canyon Park was listed. The road's open now, so you can cut a little bit of time and distance off of there by just parking at the trailheads right along the road. So they were pretty excited to hear that, and that they can make. But I said if you get a chance to just do it by going all the way up Gold Camp Road, you'll get some pretty nice views and a nice hike, and it's not hard because that road used to be a railroad. So the elevation is the angle, the elevation change is very minimal over the course of that because, like I said, it was a railroad. They can only go they can't go at a very steep angle. So I think they were going to try and maybe do it both ways, which would be kind of cool.
Nice.
One of the emails I got over the last couple of days it was a result of last week's podcast. And last week it was just me, and I spent about a half hour talking about my trip with National Geographic and Lindblad expedition to the Great Bear Rainforest. An email I got was like, can you compare them and the other groups that do these kind of trips, like REI Adventures and Sierra Club does Outings, and another one called Natural Habitat. And I think, well, that's a really good topic. Now, I've only done trips with two of those, Lindblad and National Geographic. They're partner companies, and REI. And REI, I just did the one trip, although I have a couple on my radar that I want to do with them maybe this coming year in 2023. But I thought it was a good question because I've run into people on these National Geographic trips that have done trips with other groups. So I pulled up 4 of them to kind of do a comparison, and one of which is National Geographic, the other one REI, and the other one the Sierra Club, and another one called a company called Natural Habitat. And they all do things, I want to say, a little differently. So National Geographic, and they do 2 kinds of trips. They do land-based trips, but their big thing is their ship-based ones. And I've been on 4 ship-based ones with them and 1 land-based trip. Their way of doing things is that if you're on the ship, everything you do is you go off the ship, spend a day, half a day, doing whatever you're going to do. You come back. You may go out again like in the afternoon after lunch or something. But so you may be out on a Zodiac, or actually we spent a lot of time on Zodiacs going back and forth in the ship to whatever shore we're at. You also have the opportunity to maybe do some kayaking. some
cool.
stand-up paddle boarding, all of which have staff nearby if you need any help or anything. The Zodiacs obviously are all piloted by their crew, but they're not like backpacking adventures. Now, you may do some hiking. We did some hiking on the Great Bear trip. We would go ashore and we'd do some hiking through the rainforest. And we did the same thing when I was with them in the Galapagos. Same thing when I did the Channel Islands. You go off the ship, you do some hiking, but you go back on the ship later. And that's your hotel room, your floating hotel room. And the accommodations are very nice. You know, I've always stayed in the smaller rooms. They're comfortable. Certainly not spacious. Now, get to the upper decks, they're a little more spacious. And the dining on board the ships is very good. You're definitely going to eat well. The accommodations of ships are first class. I mean, and when I say first class, they are very well kept. You never see a picture out of place. You never see anything broken. I had to report something. One of the hinges on my closet was loose or something, and I was worried mostly about it catching on my clothes. The maid service was coming by, and I mentioned it. 10 minutes later, there's somebody from the engineering group coming up there with a toolbox and like, what can we fix for you? Cool. So they were like all over it. So you rarely ever see anything that's not like fixed. And if you report like I have something here I need looked at, somebody's on top of it. So they do very well. So, and the other part of it is they're not like these huge cruise ships that you see on TV, like a Carnival Cruise Line thing or something like that. They're not that. The boat, the ship I was on this last trip, and it was the same one I was on in the Channel Islands, it was about 70 of us on board.
Oh, okay.
On the trips to the Galapagos and to the Antarctic, they're a little bigger, but I think maybe a little over 100 people. They're not these huge 40 stories. I know I'm exaggerating, but and I've seen those ships when we've been on these things. And they're huge, and there's thousands of people on them, and they're not that. These are smaller boats. Small. I don't know. I interchange boats and ships. I'm sure somebody's going to tell me what the difference is.
Oh yeah.
They're smaller than that, and there's not a lot to do on the ship if you don't go on shore. So in other words, we have these things where we're going to go on shore today and we're going to look at this or that, or we're going to see these birds, we're going to see this wildlife, or we're going to visit these sites or something like that. You can stay on board if you want. There's not going to be a whole lot for you to do. You can hang around the lounge if you want or something like that. The lounge is just the room at the front of the ship where we have our briefings and it's where the little bar is, but it's not going to be open. And, nice views, and you can be comfortable there if you want to read or something. It's not like those big cruise lines where there's like a water slide or a dance hall or anything. There's none of that stuff. So you could go on one of these trips and say, I don't want to take a trip on the Zodiac and go on shore, but you're going to miss out on the whole purpose of the trip. So none of these companies have anything like that. They're not designed for you to stay on board all day. They're designed for you. They're to get you someplace, give you a place to eat, a place to sleep, be very comfortable. They're very nice. And then the next morning, they wake you up bright and early, and today's adventures are going to be boom, boom, boom. Here's what we're going to do today. And we're going to send you on shore, and either you're going to be there all day and we'll send you with a boxed lunch, or you're going to come back for lunch, and then you're going to send you out on something else later in the day. And then in the evening, we're going to have more stuff going on.
And I'm sure a cruise is a lot of fun. My mom wants to do a family cruise up in the Alaskan area, and I'm sure they're fun, but these types of trips sound like they're much more up my alley. Yeah,
you would definitely like these kind of trips that I've been on. You would love them because you get to see all kinds of neat stuff. All these companies, except REI, that does these things by ship, all pretty much do kind of the same thing. Small boats, small crews, naturalist on board. They all have a photography component to them. So if you want to go take pictures like I do, my whole goal is to take great pictures of stuff I may never see again. You can do that on all these. Some of them have specific trips that are oriented towards photography. So if you want to go there and you just want to take pictures, they're oriented towards photography. Even some of the REI. Now, REI's stuff is all, pretty much ground-based. We're going to take you hiking through Zion National Park. We're going to take you through the Grand Canyon, which is the one I did, down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and back out, and spend a couple of nights at Phantom Ranch on the bottom of the Grand Canyon. So they're a little different there. So I think that's one of the big differences between REI's adventures and the Sierra Clubs. They're more geared towards get you out into the boonies. Some of them are backpacking trips. So you're going to be spending, I know REI does a couple through the Superstition Mountains where you're going to spend 4 days, 5 days hiking
cool.
through in camp. And I've been to Superstition. They're huge. So you could definitely spend a week out there backpacking. And they're going to send you out with a guide and, a couple and an assistant. They're going to have everything there for you, but you're going to be roughing it a little bit. Well, you may not be roughing it. Definitely not if you're on a Nat Geo Lindblad trip. You're not going to be roughing it so much. You'll be roughing it during the day.
Yeah.
Out there. I mean, I was out there in the rainforest and getting rained on, and you had to have the right gear, and you were getting, even with the right gear, it was raining a lot, and walking on wet foliage, which is like all you could do to keep from falling and breaking your neck or something like that. At night when you come back on board, you're going to sit down for a nice meal, and you're not going to be roughing it overnight, if that makes any sense.
And I forgot that REI does those types of trips where they take you out into the boonies, because my friend, actually, I'm not sure if it was REI, but they actually bought a package to basically kayak down the Green River for like 4 or 5 days. And so it's a group of people, and then there's a small crew that just brings everything you need. So you're roughing it still, but you're getting a lot of convenience too.
Yeah, you're roughing it, but somebody's doing the really hard work. Like I said, hauling everything down. They all offer, except for REI, offers trip to Antarctica. So I kind of did a quick check on what they would cost. So between, Nat Geo, Sierra Club, and Natural Habitat, they're like a trip to the Antarctic for 10 days, I think it is. All run around, actually 14 days, runs around $15,000, and you have to pay airfare and stuff. But Natural Habitat actually uses Lindblad Expeditions for their trip. So it's the same company that is part of National Geographic. So they actually use them. Sierra Club, I think, uses somebody else. It's kind of hard for me to figure out. All the prices are about the same, so they're all going to be around $15,000 to $17,000. Some of these, and it would be the same for National Geographic and Natural Habitat, one of the things I'm not a fan of is they charge you, and REI does the same thing, but to a much lesser extent, a fee. So I go solo. They charge you an extra fee because these prices are based on 2 people in a room.
Oh, okay.
If you go solo, they charge you a solo supplement fee. In some cases, it's a pretty hefty fee. I know on some of these National Geographic trips, it's like a $3,000 or $4,000 additional fee.
Wow, okay.
However, every one I've gone on, they've had some kind of promotion or special where they've waived that extra fee. So I've never paid that, and I probably wouldn't, because it would just take some of these trips completely out of my cost comfort zone. REI charges a couple $100. It's not much, but they're not using a huge ship to go anywhere. REI is also doing some trips there where, like, they have one that I've really been looking at, a hiking trip through the Great Bend National Park down in the south end of Texas, which I would love to do in the spring when the wildflowers are blooming. But it's not a backpacking trip. So you're going to be hiking like maybe 10 miles a day or so. But when you get to the end of that hike, they put you in a bus or whatever and take you to a nearby lodge where you'll have dinner and you'll spend the night. The next day they take you back out to where you're starting for that day. You hike 10 or 12 miles. Okay. They take you out. So it's kind of like a ground-based version of what Nat Geo does and stuff like that. Yeah, you'll be out there and you'll be hiking, you'll be doing stuff, but you're not backpackers. You're not carrying a big load of backpacking gear.
Yeah.
For somebody at my age, and very few people get to be my age, not really. It's a little easier. And people who just may not want, I don't want to carry that stuff. I don't want to sleep on the ground, but I want to go and experience this. I want to go experience this beauty of hiking. And I can do 10 miles a day, 12 miles a day. I've done it before. By the end of the week, I'll probably be pretty sore, but regardless. But, it'd be nice to have a nice bed to sleep in, a nice place to eat. So they're offering some of these trips, and they're not horribly expensive. I think the Great Bend one is $3,300 for
that's not bad.
5 or 6 days, a couple $100 more. What I like with what they'll do is if you're willing to share an accommodation with another solo traveler, I don't even think they charge you a solo supplement. But if you don't want to do that, they charge you just a little bit more for that. And it's probably just to cover the cost of having to rent an extra hotel room for you for that. So it's much more reasonable. I've heard people talk about the natural habitat trips. They liked them a lot. They thought they were very good. So there's a number of these groups out there. I think they're all probably going to do a great job. I'm not sure how I got hooked up with National Geographic. They must have found that I retired because all of a sudden they started sending me stuff in the mail. Like, you should go on the trip. And I've thoroughly enjoyed them. I highly recommend them. They are a little bit on the expensive side. The other thing with some of these trips is the age range of the people who go on them. So typically, the National Geographic ones and probably Natural Habitat tend to skew a little older. A lot of retirees, such as myself and a lot of other people. There were some families on this trip that I was just on that were younger. There was some on the trip I did just before that to the down the Columbia River. There were some younger people on there, part of a family trip. But they tend to skew a little older than me. Which, like I said, not many people reach my age. We're really talking old. So they tend to skew a little older, where the REI trips, obviously, since they're much more physically demanding. REI does bicycle trips, hiking trips. They do climbing trips. They do backpacking trips. More what you would expect from a company like REI that sells gear for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It makes sense. So they tend to skew a little younger. So just another thing to think about, depending on your age group. If you're a younger person and you want to do backpacking and you want to do cycling across, Europe or whatever, REI is probably going to be the really good way to go. So that's kind of, I guess, the synopsis of the difference and what these different companies offer. I'll put links to these different companies in the show notes so you can kind of check them out yourself.
Cool.
But having done REI, highly recommend REI Adventures. They're very good. Having done a number of these with National Geographic, highly recommend them. They're going to be pricey. I'm just going to warn you ahead of time. This is one of those, I sometimes have to save my dollars for a few years before I can go on one of these trips. None of them require you to pay everything fully up front unless you are making a reservation at the last minute. Then, of course, you'll have to. But you do get to, put a deposit down and
that's good.
A year ahead of time or something so that you have time to, if you're going to be able to afford it and you want to reserve your space, you get to do that. The other nice thing about doing these trips with these companies, for example, if you want to go to the Galapagos Islands, you absolutely cannot go by yourself. You can't even get on the plane to go from the mainland to the islands.
Oh, okay.
You need a special passport, and if you're not Ecuadorian, you need to be with a group. You can't boat to the Galapagos Islands by yourself. You have to go with a recognized and licensed group company such as one of these. So, sometimes you just have to use these services to go to some places. With REI, the trip I did with REI was hiking down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, spend a couple nights at Phantom Ranch and hiking back up. And there were a couple things in mind when I decided I wanted to do that with REI. One of which was I figured I could probably do a hike like that. But as you and I have talked a lot about on this podcast, that's a dangerous thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
The Grand Canyon could be, it is unforgiving. And can be hard to do. And I was like, I could probably do that by myself. But it may not hurt to go with somebody who's done this before. We've talked about that. If you're not sure, go with somebody who's done this before and you trust. The other part is reservations for Phantom Ranch are extremely difficult.
Almost impossible.
You have to be on top of it, and you're probably looking 12 to 18 months out. Well, a company like REI, they have to wait in line like everybody else, but when they get on there, they book like 15 slots. So they had the slots. I didn't have to go through the brain damage of getting a slot.
That makes sense.
They already had a bunch. They were kind of, I guess you can call it like a sublet. They were subletting them out to us who were going with them. And then, of course, they took care of everything else. So it kind of made that a little easier. And all these companies, once you're get to your destination where they pick you up, then once you're with them, you're in their hands. So you don't have to worry about transportation. You don't have to worry about travel. You don't have to worry about meals unless, they tell you which meals you may have to get. But for the most part, once you're in their hands, everything is taken care of. So it takes a lot of the worry off of trying to arrange things. And the best part is you get to concentrate on enjoying the trip.
True, yeah.
I mean, Kevin, you and I have done stuff where we've kind of winged it on our own. You've done the big circle around Utah. I've done the same thing. When you're making your own reservations and have to find a place to stay or find a campground you can camp in and then find a place to eat and where am I going to eat and what am I going to do and what happened, when you've got somebody else taking care of all that stuff, worth its weight in gold.
I bet, yeah. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that part, especially in Utah where most of the parks are in very rural areas. And so I would end up somewhere and realize there's nowhere to eat. Everything is closed by like 4 in the afternoon. And I did that when I'm trying to remember the name of the town that's outside of Great Basin and Nevada. It's like 20 minutes from the state line of Utah. And there was nowhere to eat out there. There's not a grocery store or anything. It was just a little motel that was completely booked. And then just the park. I mean, it was a tiny town.
Not even a convenience store, a gas station with vending machines. You get anything?
There was a gas station, but it was the self pump kind where it was just the gas pumps and that's it.
No, but yeah, it's not like like one of our come and goes or 7-Eleven or anything like that. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that when you go with one of these trips, they arrange that. Now that I've done the Grand Canyon and you've done rim to rim, but you didn't stay anywhere in there, I feel confident that, with a little bit of planning, I could hike down to the bottom and be perfectly fine on my own. But for a first timer, even an experienced hiker like me, it's like, this would not hurt for me to go with somebody who's done this before, knows what they're doing, has everything all reserved. I don't have to, like I say, go through the brain damage of trying to get a spot to stay in at the Phantom Ranch. And the Phantom Ranch, trust me, they have their lodges. They're actually they're like little bunkhouses. There's like 6 or 8 of you in there. So not exactly what I call luxury. Comfortable enough. It was fine. You're not going to spend...
it's a place to sleep.
It's a place to sleep. Yeah. So that's kind of the other advantage of doing trips with folks like this. Now, if you're really good at arranging all this stuff, and sometimes you have to be. If you do the big loop through Utah, which of course REI does that. They do the big loop through Utah that you can just sign up with them and they'll take you park to park to park. But the other nice thing about going on your own is like when I did it and I went to Capitol Reef and we had a couple of days of rain, it was like, I need to maybe stay an extra day. If you're on one of these trips, you don't get that option necessarily.
True, yeah.
So, you're on a time schedule. That ship has to be at port so it can pick up the next group of people, or it has to, like it did with us on this trip to Great Bear. Once it dropped us off, it was headed for Seattle, and it was going to spend a couple weeks doing more trips around Seattle. And after that, it's going to Baja California. It's going to be doing trips in Mexico during the winter. So you've got to really... you can't just decide, I want to spend 2 more days here. You can't get to do that. So there's pluses and minuses to doing these things. I don't think you can just fly the Antarctica on your own or take a boat there. I mean, I guess if you've got the money to have a boat like that, you could probably do it. But a lot of these places, you need to have one of these groups to take you to places where otherwise you just cannot get into.
I'll say that I was very, very glad that when I did the rim to rim in the Grand Canyon, one of the people I went with had done that before, and she grew up in Flagstaff, so she kind of just was always at the Grand Canyon all the time. So it was actually nice to have her knowledge and to know what her thoughts are about certain parts and to know what she thinks is the best time to start and like her strategies and such. I could have done the hike on my own, but I think the last 7 miles would have been... That was when I was physically getting extremely exhausted, and it was dark. It was getting cold as we got higher and higher up on the canyon wall up to the south rim, and it was all I could do to not just want to sit down and sleep.
Right.
And stuff. So I know if I was not with the group, I would have found a spot off trail to just sleep for like a few hours, which may not have been the safest thing to do because you're completely exposed. Right. Yeah. So
the other nice thing about these trips, and one thing I haven't mentioned, I talked a little bit about it on last week's podcast, was when you go on these trips, they're not just like, that's like putting you with any Tom, Dick, or Harry that comes along and just going to take you on a hike. They're typically, all of these groups are going to bring people who are educated in not only the activity you're doing, like, when you go on these trips with Nat Geo, they don't put you in a Zodiac and say, have a nice day, or put you in there with whoever. So there's like anything else, any other ship you go on, people have to be trained in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. If you do like a ground-based thing, you have people who have done these hikes before. They just will take somebody off the street and say, we'll take these people down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. They also have, like on the shipboard ones, a lot of naturalists who are trained. They have degrees and they know the stuff. If you went on some of these trips by yourself, you would see something cool, but you wouldn't know what it is. And there would be nobody for you to ask, hey, what is that I'm seeing, or why is that here?
Yeah.
So the idea of these is not just to go out there and go hiking and take pictures. It's also to learn something about the place you're visiting, the wildlife you're seeing, the plants you're seeing. That's the other big thing about these trips is you get to learn about the places that you're going to. So that's another advantage to doing these kind of trips. Like I said at the beginning, though, they're not cheap. You're going to spend some serious change. I mean, I've had to just save money over a couple of years before I could take one of these trips. The reason why I took so many this year was, well, the Great Bear one I reserved 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And the other two, the Channel Islands and the Columbia River trip, were relatively inexpensive. And then all these trips, even the Galapagos one, they had waived the solo fee.
Oh, yeah.
So the solo fee combined, what it would have been on all those trips, paid for another trip by not having to pay that. So if you're going solo, I would pay attention to that. Look for trips where they waive the solo fee. Now, some of them, they waive airfare. The solo fee is still more than airfare typically is. Some of them, they'll pay your bar bill for the week. As much as I like to have a bar bill as big as a solo fee, I'd be pickled if I had that. They have all these different specials, promos, whatever you want to call them. So you want to kind of pay attention to what they're doing there. So I don't know that I have any preference. I've done Nat Geo and REI. They're entirely different in how they approach things. My experience with both of them has been outstanding. I've never done the Sierra Club. Sierra Club's really big. I can't imagine they're terrible. Natural Habitat benefits the World Wildlife Foundation. I can't imagine they're terrible. And Sierra Club and Natural Habitat are there to benefit those organizations. Nat Geo is too, with their expeditions and stuff like that. So they're all there for another purpose, which is to educate you and get you out to see things you may never ever see in your life otherwise, and also to bolster their support for the groups that they're attached to. All of which is fine too, and they're not hiding that fact that by going on these trips you're supporting our missions, our goals, our outreach, whatever you want to call it. They're all doing that. I hope that answers our listener's question. I know it's a 30-minute answer, but I kind of want to go into depth. I'm actually looking at now that maybe next time I go, maybe I'll go with Natural Habitat. Although if they're gonna go to Antarctica and it's Lindblad, I might as well just sign up with National Geographic. But maybe I'll look at doing something with Sierra, and I do have some in mind that REI is offering that would be kind of fun to do.
Cool.
So I'm gonna try to do some more. 2023 might be a year of just sitting back a little bit and letting my balance for that little fund I have for trips get up a little bit to where I can actually pay for something. One of the things that this is inside baseball, so to speak, kind of stuff. But one of the things was if I go on these trips, none of them are anything that I go in debt for.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm not just I'm throwing them on my credit card, so I get a whole bunch of Southwest points, so I can pay for the airfare going out
That's
there.
smart.
But obviously, I'm paying that right off. None of these are anything that I go in debt for. Because as much as I love doing them, they're not the most important thing in life, and certainly not important enough to go into thousands and thousands of dollars worth of debt.
And I feel like the anxiety I would get by going into debt would take away from the fun of the trip too. Because then in the back of my mind, it's like, oh, I have so much money to pay back, and I couldn't really afford this, and yeah.
Yeah, and then you end up like not buying a cool trinket that you might want to come home with. That when I go on this thing, trip's paid for, so anything I get is okay. I've got the money for that. It's not a big deal. So anyway, I hope that answers the questions. If there's any more questions about these trips or anything else, by all means, I'd like to, I look forward to having people email us, or DM us, and you can get to Kevin or I, both of us, from our website, mine's hikingbob.com, his is wildwestendorf.com, and I love having people contact us and reach out to us. It's a lot of fun hearing from people. Last Wednesday when I was recording the stuff for Fox 21, 3 people stopped and said hi. And I'm not saying that because I'm bragging about anything. It was very nice that people stop and say hi and how you doing and stuff like that. And then Sunday I was out hiking there again. I was up there with a group, took a group on a hike, and somebody went by and said, "Hey, I saw you on TV the other day."
Oh, nice.
It's very nice to hear from people who stop and say hi, and we exchange pleasantries, and I like talking to them and hear what they're doing and get a feel for what they're looking for and stuff like that. So it was very nice. So the people who said hi, both last Wednesday and then again this past Sunday when I was out hiking, thank you very much. It was very nice to hear from you. Nice conversations. I look forward to hopefully running into you again and other people too out on the trails and and that kind of stuff. And Kevin, I know you've had that encounter. Those encounters too.
And I actually don't know if I brought this up on the podcast. I probably did, but I was actually on a date at Chiba Bar, which is a great little Japanese, like a cyberpunk place with really good food. I was on a date last summer, and this guy just comes up to me and he's like, Wild Westendorf. And I was like, oh, who are you? He's like, don't worry about that. And then he looks at my date and says, this guy is the man. And like, he's the hiking extraordinaire. And I was like, you're making me look really good right now. Thank you.
That's really nice, though. I mean, that really is good. It's great to hear that. And, sometimes we hear from people who don't agree with us. That's okay.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
The people who don't agree, the only thing I ask is keep it civil. Is that sometimes they bring up a point of view that you and I haven't thought about, and that happens. You bring up stuff I haven't thought about. So if you don't necessarily agree with us, that's okay. Tell me why you don't.
Yeah.
But we like to hear from people. Of course, we like hearing the good stuff. People say, hi, how you doing and stuff. So it was really pretty cool this past week to run into so many people who were familiar with the podcast and the column and that kind of stuff. So it really was kind of made it for a good week, especially Sunday. We were out hiking. It was raining most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, it's good to run into somebody else who's crazy enough to be hiking in that weather and be had seen the TV spot and said hi about it. So that was cool. Kevin, you got anything else going on there?
Nope. I think I'm good.
All right. Well, everybody, I hope we talked your ear off. We gave you a lot of information. I'll have links in the show notes for these different companies that do these tours. And if you have any other questions about them or anything else, you know where to get us. You hit us at hikingbob.com or wildwestendorf.com.
Cool.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Before you go, did you know you can rate and review our Studio 809 podcasts? That will help us because our egos really need to have thousands and thousands of listeners. But that helps our wonderful sponsors reach more ears too. And we do love our sponsors. So just go to Studio 809 or any individual 809 podcast in your iTunes or podcast app and click on ratings and reviews. Thanks.